Vaya Narayanam Namaskritta Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriye Nastapayashu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhagavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna. So thank you for this wonderful opportunity to speak on this most glorious Srimad Bhagavatam, the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. And we'll try to discuss what has been spoken by our previous acharyas on this wonderful pastime of Prithu Maharaj. So I've been asked to speak today on Canto 4, Chapter 21, texts 9 and 10. And the title of the chapter that we're reading from is Instructions by Maharaj Prithu. So I'll read the Sanskrit in word for word and translation and purport for verse 9, and then read the translation and purport for verse 10. And then we'll have some discussion. Vidura uvacha so abhishikta patu vipre labda shesha surarnaha vibratsa vaishnavam tejo bhavyor yabhyam dudohogam. Vidura uvacha, Vidura said, Saha, he, King Prithu, Abhishiktaha, when enthroned, Prithuhu, King Prithu, Vipraye, by the great sages and brahmanas, Labda, achieved, Ashesha, innumerable, Sura Arnaha, Arana, presentations by the demigods, Bibrat, expanding, Saha, he, Vaishnavam, who has received through Lord Vishnu, Tejaha, strength, Bhavyo, arms, Yabhyam, by which Dudoha exploited Gam, the earth. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Vidura said, My dear Brahmana Maitreya, it is very enlightening to understand that King Prithu was enthroned by the great sages and brahmanas. All the demigods presented him with innumerable gifts, and he also expanded his influence upon personally receiving strength from Lord Vishnu. Thus he greatly developed the earth. Purport. Because Prithu Maharaj was an empowered incarnation of Lord Vishnu and was naturally a great Vaishnava devotee of the Lord, all the demigods were pleased with him and presented different gifts to help him in exercising his royal power. And the great sages and saintly persons also joined in his coronation. Thus, blessed by them, he ruled over the earth and exploited its resources for the great satisfaction of the people in general. This has all already been explained in the previous chapters regarding the activities of King Prithu. As will be apparent from the next verse, every executive head of state should follow in the footsteps of Maharaj Prithu in ruling over his kingdom, regardless of whether the chief executive is a king or president, or whether their government is monarchical or democratic. This process is so perfect that if it is followed, everyone will become happy, and thus it will be very easy for all to execute devotional service to the Supreme Personality of God. I'll read verse 10 as well, the translation and purport. Prithu Maharaj was so great in his activities and magnanimous in his method of ruling that all the kings and demigods on the various planets still follow in his footsteps. Who is there who will not try to hear about his glorious activities? I wish to hear more and more about Prithu Maharaj because his activities are so pious and auspicious. Purport. Saint Vidura's purpose in hearing about Prithu Maharaj's over and over again was to set an example for ordinary kings and executive heads, who should all be inclined to hear repeatedly about Prithu Maharaj. Activities in order to also be able to rule over the kingdom or states very faithfully for the peace and prosperity of the people in general. Unfortunately, At the present moment, no one cares to hear about Prithu Maharaj or to follow in his footsteps. Therefore, no nation in this world is either happy or progressive in spiritual understanding, although that is the sole aim and objective of human life. Om Jnana Timidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamstra Shri Rupam Sagadatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitantam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Paridana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vitamstra Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Paramami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyev Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutesha Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasudi Gauda Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna everyone. So once again, thank you for this opportunity and beg the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis so that we may have a nice discussion today on chapter 4, text 21, chapter 21, text 9 and 10. I'll read the translation again. Vidura said, "My dear Brahmana Maitreya, it is very enlightening to understand that King Prithu was enthroned by the great sages and Brahmanas. All the demigods presented him with innumerable gifts, and he also expanded his influence upon personally receiving the strength from Lord Vishnu. Thus he greatly developed the earth." 10. Prithu Maharaj was so great in his activities and magnanimous in his method of ruling that all kings and the demigods on the various planets still follow in his footsteps. Who is there who will not try to hear about the glorious activities? I wish to hear more and more about Prithu Maharaj because of his activities are so pious and auspicious. So we see the very wonderful ruling of King Prithu Maharaj. These pastimes are most glorious. Prithu Maharaj, as we know, is the incarnation of the ruling force of the Lord to show how to put forth great rule in society. Prabhupada is guiding and making a great statement that if everybody were to follow, things would be very nice. But no nation in the world, he says, is actually doing thus. So we'll see the great ruling we've already discussed over several chapters, some of the great activities of Prithu Maharaj and some of the great qualities that was very pleasing to Lord Vishnu. So we'll discuss today, with everyone's permission, we'll discuss the eagerness of Vidura to hear more and more about the pastimes. It's notable that Vidura is making this request of Maitreya. The second topic that we could discuss a little bit about is the importance of inquiry, of asking questions. And we see this here, and we see it throughout Srimad Bhagavatam and throughout Shastra. We'll discuss a little bit about that. And then we'll discuss about the leadership in society and Srila Prabhupada's comments. Therefore, no nation in this world is either happy or progressive in spiritual understanding. And so we'll discuss a little bit about that. So that was my plan for today, and then hopefully we can have some nice discussion afterwards as well about these topics and anything else that may be related. I always like to, review the verses leading up to this, and in verse 5 was quite striking in that, King Prithu continues to show extraordinary qualities. He showed the quality of forgiveness. When Lord Indra stole the horse, he showed the qualities of strength and determination in fighting the thieves and rogues, and handling our dealings with Mother Earth. But in text 5, he shows another wonderful quality, that the king was not the least bit affected. There was great pomp and circumstance in the coronation of King Prithu, and great glories were being showered upon him, and wonderful, elaborate and opulences, and yet it's very important that King Prithu was not the least bit affected. And this is, the great Vaishnava quality, that whatever comes, the devotee knows it is coming from Krishna. It is a glorification ultimately of Krishna. When a devotee receives some glorification, he or she understands that it is not a glorification of them, but it is a glorification of Krishna and Guru Parampara. Whatever they are appreciating in that individual, it is an appreciation of ultimately Krishna. And it reminded me, when I was reading this, of the grand procession when Srila Prabhupada was touring India, and he went to Surat in Gujarat, and there was this grand procession, palanquin procession, and the whole city had really put forth extraordinary effort to receive Srila Prabhupada in an amazing way. Yet, he was the least bit affected, just as Prithu Maharaj was, understanding that, that whatever he was receiving, it was simply a service to those, trying to help all of them, make progress in devotional service. He was receiving and accepting such, glorification and service, and this utmost humility. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to maintain, to be on the recipient end of that. And you can see that the great devotees, they understand how to take on such activities, and being the least bit affected is very instrumental. And it's related to this verse in verse 9. And the reason the devotees are able to do this, they have firm understanding of where is the source of their strength, the source of whatever it is that they're doing well. It is not their own doing, but it is the source of, it is coming from Krishna. Just in this verse, in verse 9, we see, and he also expanded his influence upon personally receiving the strength from Lord Vishnu. Prithu Maharaj knew his greatness in rule, his power, whatever it was that he was doing well, even his great qualities, it was coming from the mercy of Krishna. So then where is the scope to be proud, to be very, prideful of that? It is simply the mercy of Krishna. And in Bhagavad Gita, I wanted to read one verse. It's a very nice verse. In the 11th chapter, 33rd text, Krishna is telling Arjuna, therefore get up, prepare to fight and win glory. Conquer your enemies and enjoy a flourishing kingdom. They are already put to death by my arrangement, and you, O Sabyasachi, can be but an instrument in the fight. It's a very important instruction for us, that everything is being done by Krishna, arranged by Krishna. He is the doer and the source of everything. But we also have a very important role to play. And that role is to be an instrument in Krishna's plan. And notable in that verse that Krishna calls Arjuna Savyasachi, which means that, it's ambidextrous. He can shoot arrows both left-handed and right-handed. He's calling out the great talents of Arjuna. And so, we may have talents, we may have abilities, but we should understand, one, where they come from, and two, how they are to be used. They're to be used in the instrument of Krishna. He doesn't need us. Krishna's plan will go on with or without us. But out of our, love, we have an opportunity to be a great instrument in Krishna's plans. So if one acquires great ability, as Arjuna did, this great ability to shoot arrows, it should not lead to pride, thinking, oh, I'm a great warrior. But instead, no, I have a great responsibility. Being empowered by Krishna, being blessed by the Supreme Lord, to then be an instrument in his plan, not an instrument of my own mind or my own ideas. And so we see this very wonderful situation with Prithu Maharaj, that he has acquired great facilities, great abilities. And now we're going to see how he is going to use those. We've already seen how he's used them, and we'll continue to see that in this chapter. So now I wanted to move to this topic of hearing. Vidura is very anxious to hear more and more about the glories of Prithu Maharaj. The measure of our progress in devotional service is what is the intensity of our desire to hear. We have great intensity of desire to honor rasgullas and gulab jamuns. That we know. But what is the intensity of our desire to hear? And we can see Vidura is not tiring in his desire to hear. His thirst is not being quenched. And this is a sign of great devotional qualities. He's already asked so many questions about the milking of the earth and the flattening of the earth and the sages that, the Kumaras that he'll meet, the Prithu Maharaj will meet. And yet he's asking for more and more detail. And we are the great beneficiaries of him hearing this. So this hearing of the spiritual topics is unlimitedly pleasing. There's not enough time in the day to satisfy the thirst of the pure devotees' desire to hear. And we already saw Prithu Maharaj, 2 sets of ears was not enough. He wanted millions of ears so that he could hear from the pure devotees. Parikshit Maharaj was, despite fasting and no sleep, as Shukadev Goswami approached the 10th canto to begin to describe directly the activities of Lord Krishna, Parikshit Maharaj said, please explain them in detail. Don't gloss over. Don't give me a summary thinking I am tired. No, I want to hear more and more and more. So like this, we see this great quality. But what's particularly interesting or of note with the position of Vidura, and it's indicative of his greatness and his quality, hearing about Krishna and his pastimes is one thing. But to hear about his devotees is another thing and requires even more purity. Because if often in devotional circles, if there is envy in the heart, when we hear the glories of another devotee, we become disappointed, or there is some pain that is felt. When another devotee is being glorified in our presence, and if we experience that, that is a sign of envy. But conversely, if the heart is pure and free of that envy, when one hears the glories of another devotee, it leads to their own extraordinary happiness. There is not a feeling of, oh, why this person is being glorified? Don't they know they did this and they did that? This person is just blind to the reality. I know the truth. That sentiment occurs out of envious nature. But Vidura here is so eager to hear about the glories. And we see this in Chaitanya Charitamrita so much, over and over and over again. At Ramkeli, when Rupa and Sanatan Goswami were so wonderfully receiving the mercy and being glorified by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the Vaishnavas became ecstatic and happy to see and hear the glories. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was speaking about the glories of Haridas Thakur, all the devotees around became ecstatic to hear these glories. And they went and grabbed the feet of Haridas Thakur to take some dust on their head. So this is the nature of the devotee, the nature of a heart free of envy. But when we experience maybe some dissatisfaction or some pain when we hear the glories of another devotee, it is a sign of some envy. It is a practical way for us to try to diagnose, oh, I have some envy. Let me work to try to remove that. So, this hearing, it's sometimes it's easy to hear about the glories of Krishna and his pastimes, but we should be very broad-minded and be anxious to hear about the glories of all devotees, even those in our immediate presence. It is a great opportunity for our purification. One lesson we can take from this, from these verses. The next thing I wanted to comment on, the second thing, was about inquiry, this inquiring. We know Vyasadeva says, Atato Brahma Jignasa. Therefore, you must inquire. We have this human form of life, this higher intelligence. And so this inquiry is essential in our process of perfection in life. It is the only quality that distinguishes us from all other walks of life, is this ability, this higher intelligence that we can use to inquire. And we see throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, it is question answers. Questions put forth to Shukadeva Goswami. Questions put forth to Sutta Goswami. And in this, questions put forth to Maitreya Muni. So there's constant questions and answers. In Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is opening almost every other chapter with questions. And at the end, Krishna says, have I answered all your questions? So this question and answer is actually the process by which knowledge is to be received. And so being very, thoughtful and proactive in inquiring is an important part of our devotional process. Rupa Goswami encourages us in the fourth verse of Nectar of Instruction that we, reveal one's mind and inquire from those who know. Krishna told us in Bhagavad Gita, Tadvini paripatena pariprashnena sevya pukdeshanti teganam jnaninastata darshina. One should inquire from the spiritual master. So this inquiry is being, repeated over and over again. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, one of the sweetest parts of all Chaitanya Charitamrita, his talks with Ramananda Rai. It was a series of questions. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was peppering him with question after question. Tell me more, tell me more. You're holding back. He's question and question and question. So we see the great importance of this in our spiritual process. And Vidura, is asking to hear more and more. And Srila Prabhupada, was in some ways a great innovator as he was giving classes, even in large, giant Pandal programs. It was unusual up until this time for there to be such an emphasis on question-answer sessions. But Srila Prabhupada understood the importance of that for all of us. And so every class he gave, there was a question-answer. He would speak for a short amount of time, and often the question-answer session would far exceed the duration of his own presentation. And we have become accustomed to this by the blessings of Srila Prabhupada. But it wasn't so prominent prior to the time of Srila Prabhupada, this idea of question. It was more of a you hear and don't ask questions, a one-way dialogue. But that is not our Vedic system. Our Vedic system strongly encourages this idea of inquiry. And it's very, very important, as Srila Vyasadeva has told us in this opening of the Vedanta Sutras, Atato Brahma Jignasa. We must inquire. So we're very grateful to Srila Prabhupada and all the great devotees who have taught us this process of inquiry. Of course, the mood of inquiry is very, very important. The mood of inquiry should be one of true desire to know, to hear. And Srila Prabhupada was an expert at understanding the mood of the person asking questions. One of my favorite stories from that was, once Srila Prabhupada was giving a big lecture in a big pandal program, and he was speaking about, the ass-like mentality of working like dogs and hogs, and not having a higher purpose in life, as all of his lectures speak about. And at the end of the lecture, one person came up to the microphone in the middle of this huge audience, and he said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, you said that, if we don't correct our activities, something along the lines of, he said, I don't have the exact question he said, but he said something along the lines of, if, you don't correct your activities, then, we'll become a dog in our next life. What if I want to become a dog in my next life? And Srila Prabhupada, understanding the heart of this person, was trying to be maybe challenging or smart. Srila Prabhupada responded, you have my blessing. So Srila Prabhupada was very brilliant in knowing how to also handle these questions very expertly. So we can try to learn from him. But the mood of submission is also very important. Okay. So now we'll discuss a little bit about the third topic, which is this leadership. King Prithu is known for his expert ruling and leadership. And Srila Prabhupada is saying, that if the whole world were able to rule, studying the way Prithu Maharaj did, then there would be great happiness and success in life. So he says there's only one aim, the sole aim and objective of human life. Prabhupada ends the purport to text 10 saying that no one is either happy or progressive in spiritual understanding. So this is the whole aim of life, to be happy by progressing in spiritual understanding. So the duty of leadership is very clear. One must deliver success to society by engaging everyone in devotional service. This is the measure of success of the leader, to the extent there is propagation of Krishna consciousness. Prithu Maharaj is going to speak later in this chapter in the Great Assembly. And he's going to tell the citizens, you do your duty, but you do your duty for the purpose of being able to always be fixed in devotional service by hearing and remembering Krishna. So he's very expertly guiding his citizens that you must take to this higher purpose of life. And this is the duty of the leaders. We saw in the last chapter, the leaders have a great responsibility. And also there's great risk for the leader. They take 1/6 of all of the cumulative pious results of their citizens and 1/6 of all of the impious results of their citizens. So the king, the leader, actually prospers or suffers according to the activities of their citizens. So the real leaders have a vested interest to ensure that the citizens are guided properly. And this is the Vedic system that brings about great success. And we know that the result of great leadership is everyone is happy. There is great cooperation and peace in society. Prabhupada comments at the end of in the 9th verse, he says that this process is so perfect that if it is followed, everyone will become happy, and thus it will be very easy for all to execute devotional service to the Supreme Personality of God. This is the purpose of this Varnashram Dharma we've been speaking so much about. It is to establish society in a way that everyone can peacefully coexist very nicely, so that there can be propagation of devotional service. Just having peace in society will not sustain unless it leads to devotional service. And thus, Srila Prabhupada says, thus it will be very easy to execute devotional service. That is the ultimate duty of the leaders of society, to create an environment where it is easy to practice Krishna consciousness. And we can see in today's condition that is not the case. In fact, it is quite the opposite. It is very difficult to practice Krishna consciousness, to practice spiritual life. To speak more broadly, this idea of separation of church and state. We have worked so hard to try to separate the ruling power of the citizens from the spiritual principles. This is done largely because over history there has been an improper utilization of spiritual principles by forced spirituality, but the response has not been to correct that approach by following in the footsteps of Prithu Maharaj, but instead to try to separate church and state. And that has created the great situations, horrific situations that we see today, the great travesties. But everything returned back to the principles of Prithu Maharaj, as Prabhupada is saying here, and things would be very nice. Why we see such great famines, shortages of food supplies. There should be an abundance of supplies under good rulership, being able to extract from the earth all of its nice resources. Why do we have food stamps? Millions and millions and millions of people cannot even provide their own food. Leadership has degraded so much. Tremendous amounts of suicide rates and depressions, crimes. Why do we have to lock our doors? Because someone is always after someone else's possessions. In a society where there were sufficient resources, there would be no need to even lock one's doors. And even the wealth we have, it is so fickle. It used to be in the olden days, the wealth was measured by hard goods, jewels and gold and silken cloths and spices and whatnot. That was a measure of wealth. Today, it's a number in an account that we don't even see. We're moving so much further and further away. At least even 30, 40, 50 years ago, there was, currency. And now it's becoming all electronic, digital. And just one currency crisis, one trade war, one economic recession, and all that wealth is gone. So this is the result of current leadership. The wealth is very precarious, the satisfaction, the interactions between people, and there are severe implications. Everyone has to work so hard for just basic existence. And that has an implication on one's ability to take to Krishna consciousness. We know that when Srila Prabhupada started this movement, the prescribed chanting was 64 rounds. But that became impractical because there was not enough time. People were working so hard just to maintain themselves, basic necessities, to have a home and a car. People have to work so much. All the income is going just to pay off the debts. And so thus there is not sufficient time to even come to our chanting of 64 rounds. So by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we have been given the opportunity to chant 16 rounds. But we should understand it is a function of poor leadership in society, which has not created an environment by which there is sufficient supply of necessities and thus sufficient time to take to the higher purpose of life. And so, this is the great leadership of Prithu Maharaj. And we see throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, during the rule of Lord Ramchandra, in the 9th canto, the 10th chapter, there's a great description how it felt like Satyuga despite it being Treta Yuga due to the great rule of Lord Ram. There was no bodily and mental suffering. How much mental and bodily suffering do we see today? There was none of that during the rule of Lord Ramchandra. Prithu Maharaj here, it was spoken just in verse 6, that anyone could approach him. Imagine if there was an open door policy today for any world leader, for any citizen to express their grievances. One, it'd be a dangerous situation. The leaders have to be protected, with bodyguards and armor and so much. Why? Because there's so much grievance. The leaders have not created a society that is happy. And because they're not following this Vedic process of ruling, of leadership. So we see, the evidence is clear as day. Yet, no one is ready to follow. As Srila Prabhupada said, unfortunately, at the present moment, no one cares to hear about Prithu Maharaj or to follow in his footsteps. And that is the unfortunate condition that we are in today. And unfortunately, that is predicted to continue on. Srila Prabhupada made some very, grave predictions of what was going to transpire. I was hearing in one lecture, I didn't see the reference, but I'll repeat it anyway. I take it as a good reference that Srila Prabhupada predicted that the current banking system would completely collapse sometime in the near future because of its, very fickle situation. So this is the condition, and but the path to a perfect society where it is so harmonious, it almost seems impossible today, given what we see around us. But by seeing in Srimad Bhagavatam, we see it is not impossible. It's there. It's well within reach if one follows this process of ruling, of leading. And so Vidura is asking to hear about this for our benefit, so that the world leaders, all of us, can hear about how to rule. We can imagine what it would be like if the politicians today, in these debates that they debated about and asked questions about how Prithu Maharaj ruled the world and what we can learn from Prithu Maharaj to rule this country. And on the basis of that answer, we elected leaders. We can just dream how nice things would be. So just conclude with a couple of comments on some of the qualities we see of great leaders. Discussed this a few times, but it's nice to be able to glorify some of the great leaders. Leaders, first and foremost, they are followers, which is seemingly counterintuitive. But a leader, first and foremost, is a follower. A great leader follows Shastra. They follow the guidance of Brahmanas. Yudhishthira Maharaj, he followed Bhishma Pita. We see this over and over again in Srimad Bhagavatam. Prithu Maharaj was glorified by Lord Vishnu and then told, don't follow your own mind. You follow the Brahmanas, the ministers who were guiding principles. So we see this. First and foremost, a great quality of leaders is that they are a follower. They are reluctant leaders, meaning they are not anxious to rule, but they rule out of service to Krishna. And they're an instrument in Krishna's plan. Dhruva Maharaj did not want to rule, but Krishna wanted him to. So he did. Yudhishthira Maharaj, Prithu Maharaj, they're not anxious to rule, but they will do so out of a service, being an instrument Krishna's plan. And when they get great abilities, great strength, great power, they don't use that out of false ego to exploit others, but they use that in the service of Krishna, knowing that ability also came from Krishna himself. They're very magnanimous. In verse 10, Prithu Maharaj was so great in his activities and magnanimous. They're very generous. They're caring and compassionate for all others. And we see many of these other qualities. And Srila Prabhupada, was a perfect follower of Prithu Maharaj. If you see the qualities of Srila Prabhupada, he was following. Srila Prabhupada was following the order of his spiritual master. Everything he did, down to, the fine details of how each of our programs are structured and the prayers we chant and the establishment, it's all following. He said, you worship the deities, you follow how they worship, in Radharaman temple. You chant this Gurvastaka prayer in the morning because Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur said it will take you back to Krishna and give you a specific service if you chant it during the Brahma Muhurta. You do your worship according to this, and everything that he gave was following Shastra and the previous acharyas. That was his leadership. He did not create his own ideas. He was very, intelligent. Extraordinarily intelligent. When in the early days, some of the devotees in New York, they were negotiating and trying to deal with acquiring some temple, some facilities, and the young boys were a little innocent. And in New York, it's a land of sharks, and they had given some money to one lawyer or one banker. I don't remember, it was a lawyer or banker, and they'd given some $4,000 or $5,000, and he was basically a crook. And these devotees were trying to get it back, and Srila Prabhupada was giving them instruction: you get it back, you make sure that he gives you the money back. They couldn't do it, and they had given up. They said, Prabhupada is hopeless. And Prabhupada, this Swami from India, 70-year-old man, wrote one simple letter, and this very powerful New York man fully surrendered and gave all the money back. This is the power of great leadership. And it comes from Shastra. So many other examples. Srila Prabhupada's boldness, his international expansion, always pushing, go here, go there, Russia, China, wherever it can be, very bold in his leadership. But always knowing where his power was coming from. It was by following the instructions of his spiritual master. So this is, we see these great characteristics of Srila Prabhupada. And, what does it mean for us? How can we apply some of these teachings? We're not kings and rulers of society and whatnot. But, we can apply these principles. We may be leading our own household, our home, or maybe a small temple program, or maybe, a festival, or maybe a temple, or maybe something beyond. Whatever it is, we may have some opportunities to be in a leadership position. We should be very careful, like in verse 5, not be affected by that, become prideful. Oh, now I am in charge. Now I get to do what I want. Sometimes that emotion arises. No, but again, a leader is first and foremost a follower. If we're put into any kind of leadership position, we must actually, beyond any leadership position, anything we do in devotional service, we must be able to answer one question. And that one question is, under whose direction am I acting? If I can't answer that question, I should go answer it. If I can't answer, under whose direction am I acting, then it is a sign that I'm not actually performing in the right mood. Even if it's not a leadership position, it could be any activity, any service. But particularly if we are performing any kind of leadership activity, we must be very mindful and careful to be able to answer that question. Under whose direction am I acting? because in that way, then one can have success in being a great instrument in Krishna's plan. So we can learn to lead by following, by being that servant leader, by having the goal of seeing everyone benefit, not just ourselves. And following these examples, it is also applicable to us in our day-to-day life. So end there, and we can have any discussion or comments or corrections or clarifications. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna, thank you. Any comments or questions or clarifications or corrections?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Namaste Pranam. Thank you so much for the wonderful class, Prabhuji. Nice instructions, nice points, Prabhuji. I don't have any questions. I request all the devotees, if they have any questions or comments, so Prabhuji, they can go ahead. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I have a question.
Hare Krishna, yes.
So, Prabhu, you very nicely described all the leadership qualities and very nice class. Usually, like in our mentality is, if some model is working, then we try to follow that model. Like in America, people around the world think that, oh, they have such nice society and all are wealthy and good, nice roads and all. So all countries in world like try to follow the economy of America and that model. So if the model you described, like you gave example of Lord Ram and Yudhishthir Maharaj and Prithu Maharaj, so that model was working and it's still like, so why didn't the people who were born after them, or like why didn't they follow that model? Like how I feel so frustrated, like how, because it was that such a wonderful model and everyone was very happy, then why, how it got lost?
Yeah, that's a thank you, Proti, for your nice question. It's almost befuddling how, if things are so nice, how it could go, because it takes great character and qualities to be able to lead in such a way. As soon as there is ego, as soon as there is self desires, as soon as there is any kind of personal motive, the opportunity to lead in that, the ability to lead in that way dissipates. And so as we lose our spiritual grounding and understanding, this leadership process, it will not come from an MBA. It will not come from some academic study. It's going to come from the process of devotional service. So as spiritual life degrades in the hearts of society, then the leaders, the ability to lead in this way will also will fall away. So though it is very, very clear how to lead a successful life, due to self-want and self-desire, one is overcome by this the influence of lust, basically. And so it doesn't manifest, though it's very clear. See, some will argue, oh, this is some history, some mythology, it's not real. Well, that we know over and over again, Srimad Bhagavatam is the only real source of knowledge, but it takes some faith. But by spreading this mission, by spreading this knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam, we have some hope. We have some hope that someday we could regain this type of leadership. And there are some glimpses of hope today. We have some world leaders who have been exposed to this process, to been exposed to Srila Prabhupada's books. And who knows? We are in the golden era of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's 10,000 years of progress in spiritual life. Maybe it can happen if we all work together.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dhanavad Pranam, Prabhu. Very, very nice point, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I would like one question. We all the time we are hearing, Prabhu, about the leadership qualities and these very wonderful aspects of different pastimes. But day-to-day life, how do we make small strides, Prabhu? Because I don't think we have a practical platform, to practice and slowly rise above. So how do we, like any practical tips, Prabhuji, how do we grow on a daily basis?
Yeah. Well, we do have a very strong basis to have confidence that this will happen, that these great qualities will and can emerge within us. First and foremost, these qualities, these very beautiful and wonderful and seemingly maybe unattainable qualities, or maybe very at least far-reaching qualities, we should have great faith. They actually reside within us. That is our natural characteristic. Our intrinsic qualities are pure because we are part and parcel of Krishna, the reservoir of all these qualities. So because we are part and parcel of Krishna, actually we have all of these qualities. We don't have to go search for them. They're not in a textbook. They're not in some life coach. They're residing within us. Yet they're covered. So they are not shining through. Those qualities have become subdued. So we don't have to specifically learn how to become all of these qualities, but we have to bring them out. And how to bring them out? Through our devotional service. And the most potent means of our devotional service is good chanting. By good attentive chanting, these qualities will naturally emerge. They will manifest because they're actually intrinsically who we are. So we can have great faith and confidence that it is not some wishful thinking that I can become, very magnanimous. I can have a very humble position. I could be, very free of envy and love. We should have great confidence and no, that's actually my original condition. So I can get it back. Then the question is, as you said very nicely, how practically to get it. It is through good chanting. The chanting is the cleansing process which purifies the heart and brings out our original qualities. I remember during my initiation lecture, my spiritual master was speaking about all the Brahminical qualities, and I was like overwhelmed. I'm like, oh Krishna, what am I doing? This will never happen. And then at the end of the lecture, he gave that the comment: just chant attentively and nicely, and these qualities will automatically manifest. You don't have to try to bring them out. They will automatically manifest. So the practical platform for us is to hear about these so that we aspire for them. And then through our chanting, we pray to Krishna. Our chanting should be very prayerful. Krishna, please free me of the envy so I have the desire to hear the glories of other devotees like Vidura did. Krishna, please help me remove the ego so that I can remain fixed knowing you are the source of my ability. So by hearing these pastimes and seeing how these great devotees have worked and acted and behaved, we can then use that in our prayers, in chanting, to try to bring out these qualities more aggressive, more proactive. So the more intensity by which we chant and the more purpose we put into our chanting, the quicker the result. If we're just chanting to, drop the counter beats from 1 to 16 and put the beat bag away, well then, the results, they'll still be good results, great results. But if in approaching our chanting, we are aspiring to bring out these great qualities, having studied them and seen them in Shastra, then we'll actually make much more rapid progress. And that's why Srila Prabhupada said, one should cry out to the Lord while chanting the holy names of the Lord. So that is the practical platform. It's there within us. We should have great confidence. It's not some, lofty goal that, may or may not happen. No, it is our intrinsic nature being part and parcel of Krishna. And we have the most potent means to bring that out. And we just follow. Is that okay, Prabhuji?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Dandavad, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you, going to be the Bhagavad Maharaj. Very beautiful lecture, Prabhuji. I had a quick question. This was regarding the topic of eagerness to hear. And as you rightly pointed out, one point, they're just thinking about eagerness to hear about Krishna and his pastimes, that is very easy. But that eagerness to hear the glories of other devotees, especially who are immediately close to you, that can be a little bit difficult sometimes. So how to develop that mood that we can hear the glories of all devotees with that same sentiments, with the same enthusiasm. How to develop that?
Yeah. It's well, ultimately I'll give the same answer as always. Chant nicely. Because the lack of our eagerness to hear is due to the impurities in the heart. There's anarthas in the heart. Specifically, there is envy. Why the Mayavadis don't want to hear about Krishna's glories? Because they want to be Krishna. So they don't want to glorify them. They can't even hear the glorifications. Right? So that's on the one level. When we can't take or tolerate the glorification of another devotee, we should know immediately there's some envy in my heart. Well, if I accept and acknowledge, okay, there's some envy in my heart. Now I can work to remove it. If I'm in denial of it, or don't see it, or don't diagnose it, well, then I won't be able to extract it, right? So, when we're in the midst and someone is glorifying another devotee, we feel some pain. Okay, yes, I have some envy. And in my chanting, I should, approach Krishna and beg how I can become free of this envy. Right? And when we see, particularly in Chaitanya Charitamrita, you see over and over and over again these wonderful Vaishnava qualities. It is one of the sweetest aspects of Chaitanya Charitamrita is how the devotees associate and interact with each other. They inspire and propel others forward instead of getting their elbows out and let me go first. They are relishing others' success in devotional life. When someone receives Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's special mercy, they become ecstatic, not thinking, oh, why I did not get it. Instead, they become happy for that, the recipient of that mercy, not dissatisfied because they were not the recipient. So when we study these shastras and see these moves, we can think, wow, that's not me. I would not be able to do that. I would not be able to sit outside the garden while Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is enjoying all wonderful prasadam with all his devotees. And if I was on the outside not being able to participate, I would not be happy. Haridas Thakur was very happy. seeing all the other devotees receiving personally from the hands of Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, different offerings from Lord Jagannath. He was happy. So he say, I would not be. Let me pray to Haridas Thakur for his mercy. So that we have to diagnose the situation, understand it is due to the envy in the heart, and then acknowledge it and understand that envy often comes from those we're closest to. That is the sad part about envy. It often manifests in those that are most dear to us. We become envious of. And in Kali Yuga, we'll see, in Srimad Bhagavatam, it says that one will even become envious of Guru, of the spiritual master, and will try to kill Guru. That's how far it will go. So if we become aware of it, and we become conscious of it, and by, again, good chanting, we can rid ourselves of that feeling. One other practical maybe piece of or one practical idea you can try. When another devotee is being glorified and we don't relish that, at least in our own mind and heart, we should glorify that devotee. We may not externally do it for whatever circumstances, but in our own heart and mind, we should glorify that person. It's actually a very nice experience. It uplifts the heart. So I'll maybe stop there with that. Is that okay, Mataji?
That's beautiful. I really like that idea. The last one. And kind of practical too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much for doing that. Hare Krishna.
So, Prabhuji, one more question is you told about this leadership quality that question we should ask to us, that under whose direction am I acting?
Yes.
So Prabhu, it has to be a living person, or can we, while taking an initiative, can we think like, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Jare Dekho Tare Kaho Krishna Updesh, or like Srila Prabhupada is saying distribute. So it's like you have to act under a living person, like some initiative you are taking, or you can take.
Well, that the answer to that question is it depends. It depends on the circumstance and the details and specifics of it. If one is a very advanced devotee, they can take direction, directly from Paramatma in the heart, Krishna. If they are able to hear that direction very clearly, their frequency is tuned in very nicely. But practically speaking, in the existence we live, that we should work in cooperation and under coordination with the society. Srila Prabhupada wanted us to work within ISKCON, under in cooperation, not in independence. Oh, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said this, so I'm going to do that, but my temple president wants me to do something else. Well, that's why Srila Prabhupada, established that, the temple president must be followed. Even if immediately is not in the right decision is being made, still one should follow it, he said. For the purpose of, creating, again, this sort of unity and harmony in what's happening. So I can say almost all or most circumstances, we should practice our different activities, again, under some guidance. And that's what saves us from making mistakes. It is not, it is only for our good. It is only for our good. As soon as we start, acting under our own ideas, then the potential for mistakes come. And you see that the great devotees, the great acharyas, they had this extreme mood of following. Narottam Das Thakur was told by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, you take initiation. So he had this vision. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you take initiation from Loknath Swami. And when Narottam Das Thakur went to Loknath Swami, and he refused it. He could have said, well, he had already been given Krishna Prema by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. He had deposited in the Padma River for him. He was already achieved love of God. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told him. So he said, okay, he's acting under Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But as soon as he took initiation after so much endeavor, what did Loknath Swami say? You go learn from Jiva Goswami. And so what did Narottam Das Thakur do? He went and studied under Jiva Goswami. And he was relishing the opportunity to be in Vrindavan, to stay in Vrindavan in the association of all the devotees. And then when Jiva Goswami said, you go out and you distribute books, what did he do? He went out and distributed books. The great, great Narottam Das Thakur. What did he do? He followed the instruction. Yes, he was directly instructed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to take initiation. But he followed. And you see this quality in all great devotees. It is not a sign of weakness or a sign of immaturity. Oh no, now I know what to do on my own. That is a sign of our false ego and our impurity and lack of development in spiritual life. So the practical thing is in almost all circumstances, I can say, it's hard to say in all. Yeah, there's, we should be following under coordination. Of course, there may be some exceptions in specific circumstances. Is that okay, Prabhu?
Yeah, thank you. It was very, very nice explanation.
Any questions or comments on Prabhuji? If there are no more questions or comments, I think we can end the call here. Let's pay our obeisances to all the Vaishnavas and Prabhuji. Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyo Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai Shri Prabhupada ki jai Rangira Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai His Grace Mystical Sudas Prabhuji ki jai. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for a wonderful class.